So, I'm filming this on Thursday, April 6th. The Super Mario Brothers movie just came out yesterday, and yeah, I saw it. So, I'm going... Oh god. Oh, this popcorn's gone stale. Yeah, I should know that. So, as I mentioned at the start of the video, yesterday, by the time I'm recording this, I saw the Super Mario Brothers movie. And anybody who's been watching me for the past 5 years or longer might know that, one, I am a massive Mario fan. This franchise has been hugely important to me in both my development, in my youth, and my growth as a person. I care so deeply about these games and these characters and this franchise that on the path to this movie, I have pretty much been on edge the entire time because I didn't know what exactly to expect. I was nervous at first because of Illumination's involvement, and I'm not really a big fan of their work outside of the first Despicable Me film, but in reading interviews with Chris Meledandri, who's the head of the studio, and in seeing the footage that was presented in the trailers and the commercials, I was genuinely impressed with how seriously they were taking this and just how much it looked like the games. Without any exaggeration, I feel like I have been waiting for this movie my entire life, and it feels very surreal knowing that it's here and I've seen it. This is going to take some getting used to. But I'm actually going to be making 2 videos on the Super Mario Brothers movie. The first one is the one that you're watching right now, which is my spoiler-free / first impressions sort of thing. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, don't worry, I'm not going to give any major details away here. But the second video is going to be much deeper and more in-depth and filled with spoilers, and I'm not going to be working on that until I see the movie again this weekend with my family. So let's start things off by answering everyone's first big burning question. Is the Super Mario Brothers movie any good? Yes. Quite good, actually. I know critics have been, tearing it to pieces. In fact, I think on Rotten Tomatoes right now, it's sitting at, a 53%, which, I don't know. It might just be a matter of, they haven't played the games, or, I don't know, maybe they just hire the wrong people to go see the wrong movies. This movie isn't perfect, but I really enjoyed it. This was pretty much almost exactly what I was wanting it to be. So the basic premise is Mario and Luigi have just quit their jobs at the Wrecking Crew and are now running their own plumbing business in their hometown of Brooklyn, New York. But then Brooklyn faces a major plumbing problem that threatens to flood the entire city pretty much, and so Mario and Luigi take it on themselves to try and fix it, but then they find this magical warp pipe that takes them into the Mushroom Kingdom, but not in the same place because they actually get split off and go into different pipes. So Mario ends up in the Mushroom Forest, and Luigi ends up in this place called the Darklands, which is ruled by Bowser. And Bowser has this plan to steal this magical superstar, use it to become invincible, and essentially take over the entire world. And he also has Luigi held captive. So Mario teams up with Toad and the ruler of the Mushroom Kingdom, Princess Peach, to rescue Luigi, defeat Bowser, and save the day. There is a little more to it than that, but I can't really talk about it without going into spoilers, so just wait until my next video comes out and I'll talk a little more about it there. But really, it doesn't get any more complicated than that. And that was a big point of criticism that I noticed from, actual movie critics, is that the movie is incredibly light on story. Have you played a Mario game? Unless it's an RPG, they're all pretty much light on story. Obviously, I would have liked to see maybe more layers on top of it, but that's not to say that there isn't any sort of character development or any meaningful moments that happen between the characters. I will say not all the characters really get a lot of development, like Toad, for example. Toad's whole thing is that he wants to go on this big, grand, epic adventure because I guess he feels insignificant, but he still loves living in the Mushroom Kingdom, and he wants to do everything in his power to help protect it. And because of that, I thought his character arc was pretty much going to be him going on this journey to prove himself. He does get involved in the majority of the film, but that character arc that they hint at when he's introduced, there's no real payoff, I think. And the same can kind of be said about Princess Peach, who I don't think even really has a character arc. We learn a couple things about her in the middle of the film, but while she's not like the generic, strong female character type whose only personality trait is that she's strong and female, she also doesn't really have a lot of personality. She's nice, she's kind, she's tough, she's sweet, she's a good ruler, she cares a lot about her toads, but there isn't much else to her besides that. Now, the filmmakers definitely took some inspiration from the Super Mario Adventures comics when coming up with this version of Peach. But in those comics, Peach is sweet and cute and innocent, but what really makes her stand out is where she gets really intense, like fire in her eyes, just beating people up, saving herself. She's very, very intense in those comics, and she doesn't really have that same level of intensity in this film, and I think if she did, it would have made her character a little more interesting. I think the character that goes through the most development in this movie is Mario, because at the start of the film, he quits his day job and opens this plumbing business that's just starting out. He's gonna get his big break. He wants to make a difference in his hometown, and he wants to make a difference in people's lives. But while he constantly seems to make mistakes, he never gives up. And he's completely dedicated to doing right by his brother. And this movie really challenges him to a point where he comes close to giving up, but then he gets right back up again. He realizes that while he might not be able to make a difference in his hometown of Brooklyn, he might be able to make a difference in this new place to call home, the Mushroom Kingdom. What else I really liked about the story was just how much it revolved around the relationship between Mario and Luigi. Now, Luigi isn't really that involved in a majority of the film. He's pretty much held captive by Bowser for the back half of Act 1, the entirety of Act 2, and the front half of Act 3. So he and Mario aren't together as often as they are in the live-action movie, where Luigi plays a much bigger role. And I do wish that Luigi had more to do in this film besides just wait around for Mario to rescue him. But I do like how Mario's drive and his motivation stem from how much he cares about Luigi. In fact, there is one scene in particular that really drives this home, and I think it does a great job at getting you on Mario's side and making you want to see him succeed. Another big complaint that I've been hearing from critics about the story and the script is the overabundance of references and fan service and Easter eggs and how they just sort of take away from the plot and the characters. And for the most part, I completely disagree with that. There are maybe one or two instances of fan service that seem kind of intrusive in a way, but for the most part, I think the filmmakers do a really good job at avoiding making the references and the Easter eggs too distracting. There were times in this movie where I would recognize something from another thing, whether it was a Mario game or even another Nintendo game, but not gonna say what exactly, of course. And I would point at the screen and be like, oh, hey, it's that thing. But it wouldn't pull my attention away from what was going on. It helps, too, that all the references and the Easter eggs were more in the background and not so much in the foreground. And even if there are points where you don't understand the reference, it's almost completely irrelevant because it still works in the context of the movie. I was also really impressed with how they were able to tie in moments like Mario's fight with Donkey Kong and the whole Mario Kart sequence, and still give us valid reasons for those moments to happen. With the Mario Kart sequence, there are points where it feels like this is only here for the sake of spectacle and references or whatever, but when you really think about it, there actually is kind of a reason for this sequence to be here. And it is certainly one of the highlights of the movie, because the action is so intense and the animation is spectacular. All in all, the plot is incredibly thin, but again, it's a Mario movie, and Mario games are generally very thin on storytelling, so this didn't really bother me. And the tone, I felt, was just absolutely perfect. Like, it was just the right blend of action and comedy and emotion, too. Like, there were some truly, genuinely emotional moments in this film. Like, not tear-jerking necessarily, unless you're a really big fan of the games like I am, but there are moments between the characters that are just really sweet. And, you know, I think we need more movies like this that are all about just making you feel something and also having fun. What I was saying before, too, about the way the movie incorporates references to the games, that also applies to the music, which is probably one of my favorite aspects of this film. I don't know if I've said this before in other videos, but Brian Tyler isn't one of my favorite film composers, but he really knocked it out of the park with this. In fact, I think the Super Mario Bros. Movie might just be the best film score that he's ever done, because he includes musical pieces from the games, but also weaves in his own original themes, which honestly are pretty great and genuinely sound like they could have come from any newer Mario game. Like, the main theme he has for the Mario Brothers especially, that sounds like it came straight out of like Galaxy or Odyssey. And just the fact that he went the extra mile to include music from the games as well, which is a big problem I have with adaptations like this, because if you're making a movie based off something that has particularly iconic music, you should include that music in some way, not just like tease the audience with it, or just give us completely new music that doesn't sound anywhere near as good or iconic. The Sonic movies are especially guilty of that. As much as I do enjoy those movies to an extent, the music is pretty generic most of the time. What else I really appreciate is that Brian Tyler doesn't over-rely on the pre-existing music. He only uses it in moments where it's the most effective. He doesn't pull from a lot of games. It's mostly like the main games and the Mario Kart games, and a little bit of Donkey Kong Country too when they get to the Jungle Kingdom. So you're not going to hear songs from Paper Mario or Dr. Mario or the sports games or any of the other spin-off games. But it doesn't really matter to me because there is still quite a lot of Mario tunes in the score. And like any music from the games at all beyond just the overworld theme is perfectly fine with me. There's even one song in particular that pops up that just made me burst into tears hearing it in the film, because it's from a game that means a lot to me personally. And just hearing it in a movie on the big screen with a huge orchestra playing it, like, really good stuff. Another big question: how is Chris Pratt as Mario? Well, he's good. He's great. He did a really good job. Obviously, neither he or Charlie Day do the iconic Italian accents that we hear in the video games. I will say, though, they do touch on that in a pretty funny way, but I'll talk more about that in my spoiler video. But there was never a point in this movie where it sounded like Chris Pratt was completely disinterested. He always sounded like he was giving it his all. And frankly, I could understand the pressure that he must have felt, because Charles Martinet is iconic in the role of Mario, and Luigi as well. So having to follow that and try to do something different while still paying tribute to what came before, that can't be easy. And the way that he does it, I think, works really well in the context of the movie. Actually, mentioning Charles, he has some really great cameos in this movie. Not gonna say what, but take my word for it, it's amazing. And the fact that they even gave him roles at all is just truly admirable. But Pratt genuinely does kind of get lost in the role. In fact, there were points where I honestly kind of forgot that Chris Pratt was voicing him. He just so naturally and effortlessly became the character. I thought he did a really good job, and definitely does not deserve any hate that he might still get. Obviously, though, the highlight of the movie is Jack Black as Bowser, who's absolutely perfect and completely steals the show. Jack Black's Bowser is a lot of things. He's genuinely scary at times. He's brutish, he's silly and pathetic. This version of Bowser feels like he stepped off the pages of the Adventures comics at times, and this is probably my new favorite version of the character in anything. There's one particular moment that had everybody in the theater just laughing hysterically. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. The voice acting in general in this movie is great. Everybody gives a good performance, but Jack Black in particular absolutely steals the show anytime he's on screen. So now I don't really know what else to talk about with this movie without getting into spoilers. If I can say anything, though, I could probably give some advice for people who haven't seen it yet but are planning to go see it. The most important piece of advice I can give is don't set your expectations too high. Don't go into this movie expecting it to be like the Lego movie, where it's incredibly self-aware and tongue-in-cheek. Not that I wouldn't be against a version of Mario that's like that, but that's not what this movie is. I'm perfectly fine with the tone, but if that's what you're expecting, then that's not at all what this is going to be. The jokes come less from poking fun at elements of the games and more from moments between the characters. And also, don't go into it expecting to see certain characters. Like, there's been a lot of speculation about who would be showing up in this movie, and there are a couple characters from the games that pop up from time to time. Some pretty big ones, too. But chances are you're not gonna see one or two characters that you might be hoping for. And this is especially apparent in the post-credits scene, because there is some kind of reveal that you're either going to be incredibly excited about or incredibly disappointed with. So just keep that in mind. There are characters that pop up that you won't be expecting to see, but don't get too upset if you don't see any of the characters that you were actually hoping for. Lastly, bring your family, because to me, this is like one of the most perfect family films that you could possibly go see. In fact, this movie feels like it was designed and crafted in a way that anybody of any background can enjoy it for whatever reason. So you can find something to love in this movie, whether you're a hardcore Mario fan like me, or you're just a casual Mario fan, or maybe if you're an adult that played Super Mario Brothers as a kid but haven't really played any of the other games since then, or if you don't even play video games at all. Parts of it might be a little alienating for that last group, but I sincerely believe that this movie has something for everybody. It's a movie that genuinely makes you feel happy walking out of the theater, but also a little sad knowing that it's over, because you were just having so much fun with it, you just don't want it to end. And you know, critics or whatever, they can dislike the movie all they want because they're people. They're entitled to their opinions. At least, I'm assuming they're people. At this point, I can really only speak for myself now when I say that I do kind of wish there was a little more meat to this movie, but for what it is, I am incredibly satisfied with what we got. I had an absolutely great time, and I'm genuinely impressed that a movie like this came from Illumination of all people, and it's completely devoid of all the Illumination tropes that I normally don't like in their movies or just generic kids movies in general. Maybe there are a couple here and there, but the movie as a whole is just an absolute blast. Any concerns that I had going into it are now pretty much completely gone, and I absolutely can't wait to see what comes next. Now, of course, there is so much more to this movie that I wish I could talk about, but I can't without going into spoilers. So that's gonna have to wait until my spoiler video, which will come out sometime next week after I go see the movie again. And if anybody else out there has seen this movie yet, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Was it pretty much what you wanted? Were you a little disappointed? Just whatever you have to say, let me know in the comments. And before I go, I also want to give a shout out to my superstar supporters for this month, Red Rack, Henry Newman, and Jake Winans. I don't feel this is a very appropriate video to go more into self-promotion, so I'm just gonna wrap things up here. And until next time, this is Mark, bidding you all a smashing farewell. Be good, behave, be safe, and I'll see you later.